So, welcome again, friends. This is lesson 10 tonight, How to Be a Good Leader from the Material Success course. And I don't know if you had a chance to review this lesson, but it's quite powerful. And there's a lot in here that Swami gives, a lot of stories, a lot of simple principles on leadership. So, I thought we would, I have some highlights, of course. Feel free to share at any point any comments, questions, anything that stands out for you. But it's interesting. Swami, immediately when he's starting this lesson talking about the principles, brings up this story from Autobiography of a Yogi. You might recall this story when Yogananda was in his guru's ashram, and there was a young disciple that Sri Yukteswar accepted named Kumar. And for whatever reason, Sri Yukteswar was more lenient on Kumar. And shortly after Kumar arrived, he put Kumar in charge of the ashram, the other young monks, and he took Yogananda out of that position and said, occupy your time with cooking and helping the kitchen and sweeping up. So like a seeming demotion, if you will. But Yogananda didn't affect him. He just went about his duties there. And all of the other young disciples in the ashram would go to Yogananda for advice and for counsel. And Kumar couldn't stand this. And he went to Sri Yukteswar and he said, you put me in charge, and yet they all go to him for advice and help. And Sri Yukteswar said, that's why I assigned Mukunda to the kitchen and you to the parlor. A worthy leader has the desire to serve and not to dominate. Return now to your earlier work as cook's assistant. This is a powerful story, but it's the heart of this lesson that Swami is talking about. To be a good leader, we must have that desire to serve. In fact, Swami wrote, it's another book that we publish, you might be aware of, called The Art of Supportive Leadership, which I highly encourage. It's a great book. It's a short little manual on leadership. Things like leadership is not an ego game, leadership is about service. Really short chapters. It's actually been a bestseller in mainstream bookstores, and corporations have used it for trainings and things like that. But this concept of service as a leader is really essential, because remember, this is not a normal course in material success, right? Normal modern day success is about the bottom line, right? Of money, of you have to know your numbers and you've got to make things work that way. It's not that Swami isn't, of course, talking about being successful. Our material success will be a reflection of inner success, but he's helping us remember the highest principles. And one of those high principles in leadership is this desire to serve, to be of service to others. And if you can see leadership as a role in service to others, it can be a very beneficial role. Swami, elsewhere in the chapter, tells that story when he was leading the monks at Mount Washington, and Dr. Lewis, who was a senior disciple, an older man than him, and they were in a van, and all the monks were in, and somebody else was in the front seat, and Swami was in the back. And Dr. Lewis said, why are you in the back? You should be in the front. And Swami knew what he meant, but he said, why should I be in the front? He said, because you're the leader. And Swami said, that's exactly why I should be in the back. Now, of course, all these things that Swami's putting, he's not trying to make it a rule. You should always sit in the back of the van. And what he's trying to say is we need to learn to be appropriate for the given situation. I thought a lot about that because Yogananda Swami wrote somewhere that he was like perfectly appropriate for every given situation. And how could that be? Well, he was living not from habit, right? Most people are just on their programming of habit. Habit, remember, it's helpful, but habit is actually in the Indian epic, the Mahabharata, the forces of good and evil, the Pandava brothers being our forces of light, and the Kauravas being the forces of darkness. Drona represents habit, and Drona trains both the Pandavas and the Kauravas, right? So we have good habits and we have bad habits. We're from that makes sense. But what may not make initial sense is that habit sides with the Kauravas. It sides with our subconscious tendencies, our material tendencies. Think about that for a moment. Like, a habit of tying your shoe. It's a simple habit, but it's a part of our nature that is subconscious, right? We're trying to, as aspiring, as yogis, as lovers of God, to reclaim our birthright as children of the infinite. And our superconscious nature is attuned to our to that infinity, whereas subconscious is just we need habit, right? And we need to develop the habit of meditating and good habits and moral conduct and all of that. But really, that's just the foundation. And so, in order to be appropriate, coming back to that word in Yogananda, he was living in a state of super consciousness. And so it's like Swami said, he couldn't remember what Yogananda looked like. And if you look at pictures of Yogananda, he would say that he would reflect that moment or that person's higher nature. Uh, like a master's actions are like writing on water, right? They're perfectly fresh and appropriate again for the moment. And so this is one of the keys that Swami's talking about for us in this lesson of good leadership, because we have to use our intuition, right? Sometimes we do need to, of course, we need to be strong in ourselves to be a good leader. Swami told the story of when he was starting Ananda back in the late 60s, the counterculture movement. What was it? Tune in, turn on, drop out, the movement of the 60s. And he said a lot of the young people that came, um, they basically didn't want to do anything, and they didn't have an interest in his guru. They didn't have an interest in Yogananda and the teachings. Not all of them. This is, some of them. But and they wanted, there was this, I guess, popular thought at the time of rule by consensus. And where is that? Let me try and find that section. Oh yeah, this is on, if you have the book, page 155. The swelling numbers of members, quote, insisted on rule by consensus, a concept that had been popularized in literature of the day, touting it as the best way for small communities to function. Although the concept had its points, I at once realized it was unworkable, for it would paralyze decision-making and hinder practical action. What was I to do? Consensus was a dogma among the free-thinking young of those days. To win them over, I realized I had to be flexible. It would have been pointless to oppose them on everything. He goes on to talk about that point, but you know, as a leader, he had to concede certain things, and so this sort of rule by he tells the story as well that there was uh, finally, after 5 years, the rule by consensus, this group said, well, this one dog can't be part of the community, and the dog was a stray dog that nobody really owned, and it barked at visitors and chased animals and things like that. And Swami was using this as an illustration that it it hinders willpower, it hinders initiative to think everything's going to be a rule by consensus. So what did he do? He didn't oppose that. Swami chose consciously to work with the people that were in tune with what he was trying to do, who were positive and solution oriented. This is coming back to that again being appropriate, right? And our conscious mind is more problem oriented, and people that complain, right, is more from a subconscious level. And so Swami was trying to work with people that were solution oriented, which is more superconscious, right? It's like that saying of the Native Americans that if you get a poison or sick in a certain area, you're stung, whatever it may be, that the antidote for that poison is within a 1 mile radius of, say, that the plant or the snake that poisoned you. So there's always, it's like Yogananda said, life is nothing but a continuous series of problems for us to overcome. And in fact, he said that it's like our religious duty, right? It's like our dharma, to use a Sanskrit word. It is our dharma to bring the light of super consciousness to whatever problems life presents to us. And in fact, that's really what it's all about, because this is where we're learning that we're not dependent upon what's happening outside of us, right? We can learn as yogis to be a cause and not an effect. And this is a very important point. It's like the affirmation we just did together. I am self-contained. I need nothing, right? I live to serve all, to bring them to our highest good, God's joy. Swami has another affirmation. I am strong in myself. I am complete in myself. The joy and perfection of the universe await discovery within my inner being, right? So it's within. It's learning. This is why we need to learn to meditate and to find our happiness within. Nayaswami Jyotish has an affirmation. I am thankful for this day. I welcome every hour. I am grateful for my life exactly as it is. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. But I brought that up because that line, I am grateful for my life exactly as it is. Right? We need to train ourselves that there's no condition not to condition our happiness. And we think, well, once we get it together, right? Once we get this part of our life together, this part, that part, then we'll have it all just perfect. But of course, that's not the kind of perfection that we are seeking. We're seeking inward perfection, inward and inner contentment, a sense of inner peace and happiness. And so Swami, in terms of leadership, he he chose to work with those people that he saw had that type of solution consciousness. And this is one of the principles at Ananda. People are more important than things, right? There's a pitfall to think that community or building or leadership, building an organization will be about creating the perfect system, right? Being like, once you get this system set up and everyone follows the protocol, well, yeah, here, I found this is on 153. The greatest mistake made by the founders of intentional communities over the centuries has been to imagine that Human perfection can be achieved through the perfect system. Such perfection cannot be achieved by imperfect human beings and must be achieved inwardly by free will. It cannot be imposed on them from without. The universe itself was not created to make men perfect, but to give them an opportunity to achieve perfection themselves. Earth is a school merely, and those who are born here come to learn certain lessons, particularly how to relate their natural ego motivation to a much broader reality. It's very powerful. So, and Swami was beautiful at this, that he didn't impose his way as a leader, right? He could have said, well, I was the one, I'm a direct disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda. None of you young whippersnappers ever met him. You should, he was 42 at the time when these, young upstarts, if you will, were coming into the community. But Swami would be strong too when it was called for. Like he tells the story, not sure where it was, there was a 24-year-old young man who said, well, in Japan, they have this tradition where the old people give the community and leadership to the young people coming in. And Swami said to this man, like, Joe, I didn't create this community to turn it over to you. He was strong with him because he saw that this was coming from a place of ego from this young man. So Swami's talking about these two principles throughout, do what works and do what is right. That's where the do what works is where communities are a beautiful and like a living laboratory, right? To see, well, what works in community. And you can see over time that the people that think of giving, that think of how their actions will impact others within the community, that think about how can they serve versus how they can dominate, right? Those are the attitudes that win in the long run. In fact, that's what it's Swami had that style of, and I like to think of it as an invitation through inspiration, right? He didn't impose this is the way we should do things. He tried to invite you through inspiration. And the more you get in tune with that inspiration, right, the more it's coming from within you that you want to uh, find a solution, or you have a creative initiative on a new project or a way something that can be done. Swami talks about that. For a leader to feel threatened by his subordinates' creativity shows, an insecurity in the leader. We want to foster that and support that and encourage that in others. There's this one part that I highlighted on page 154. Yeah, this in support of what we were just talking about. The difficulty in working with people is that they have their own priorities, which must be treated as facts, even if they are, in fact, mere delusions. Politically free, people cannot be driven. They must be led. They must be inspired to do what is right. Sri Satya Sai Baba expressed this fact to me in a letter he wrote me many years ago in his own handwriting. He was encouraging me in my early attempts at building Ananda. That was a letter that Sai Baba wrote to Swami saying it's easy to impose on people, but it's a challenge to lead them. And again, this principle of leadership through inspiration and support and helping draw people. Because, I mean, let's think about it. We're talking about the path of self-realization, as Yogananda called it, right? Capital S. So if that's the high principle that we are aspiring towards, if we impose on others, it's antithetical to self-realization. It's each one of us individually has to have the divine experience, and it can't be it can't be imposed from without. It has to be felt and experienced from within. And then he goes on, he talks about the second principle, do what is right. Yatta dharma tatta jaya, that Sanskrit phrase that he would often quote. Where there is adherence to right action, there lies victory. Now, this again comes back to being appropriate, because what is right action? What's going to be right for Dr. Fred might be wrong for somebody else. I always love, there's a really simple example of this that Swami gave. If you think of um, a saint, like let's say Mahatma Gandhi, one day said, I'm tired of serving humanity in this whole nonviolent movement. I want to become a millionaire, and hey, let's go make some big money, some big bucks. Or if Mother Teresa said, I'm tired of serving the poor, I want to make some money. Wouldn't everyone feel like, wow, that was a sort of a step down for that person, right? From a saint in service to humanity to wanting to make a lot of money. But if, let's say, Dr. Fred had a cousin that was a lazy bum, so to speak, no offense, Dr. Fred, I'm just, going on a tangent here. And let's say Dr. Fred's cousin one day said to him, hey, Dr. Fred, I want to become a millionaire. I've got this idea to start a business. And he no longer was sat on the couch, and he got out there to try and make his first million. Wouldn't you say, wow, that's great. That's a good step for that person. So values in this sense are relative, right? But they're relative towards an absolute principle of inner freedom and expansion. This is in India, and this is a more in-depth conversation that we can get into today of the caste system, right? Of moving from heavy energy to ego active to light energy. There's actually a whole other book Swami wrote called Education for Life, and we have within Ananda a big education for life movement. We have schools. We have one here at Ananda Village, Palo Alto, elsewhere. There's a huge movement in India. Nayaswami Narayan, who's training teachers in India and education for life with these principles, is going into thousands of schools in India. But the principle is focus on the individual, right? And try to cultivate their soul qualities. Acknowledge, wow, this child is more feeling oriented or will oriented or intellectually oriented. And you try to work with its individual centered versus curriculum centered, right? Education, mainstream education today is just cram in as much information as you can and kind of like regurgitate it out. That's not true education. What this type of education we're talking about, education for life, is learning maturity. And by maturity, we mean learning to relate to other people's realities. And so, in order to, as a leader, do what is right, we have to have a sense for Dharma. We have to have a sense for right action. We have to have a sense for the individuals we're working with and what their next step would be, and how to coax and draw out their own center of intuition so that they can be inspired to take that next step. Let me pause there. Dr. Fred, I thought maybe you were wanting to share something.
I just like the point that you made about consensus, because a false consensus can fall into complicity. And I think that's what he was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want people just making a consensus and agreeing without dissent. Sometimes dissent is important for creativity. And as we could, I mean, I don't want to bring up watching the TV and all these political leaders, because
Yeah.
that's terrible. But what happens is no one is saying anything like I don't agree with that, you know, and this is
Yeah.
why. And so that consensus, it can be in some, when it's a good consensus, fine, but a lot of times consensus is misconstrued as something that can cause really great harm to
Mm-hmm.
to, to groups.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up, Dr. Fred. It's a very important point. One time, Swami commented, you were in a lower age, remember, right? This is, if you go back to the Yuga cycles, which we've touched upon lightly in this course in our book studies, we have Kali Yuga, the age of materialism, Dwapara Yuga, the age of energy, Treta Yuga, the age of thought, and Satya Yuga is the age of harmony and spirit. We're in lower Dwapara Yuga, right? It started in 1700. There was a 200-year bridge period, Sri Yukteswar said. It started properly in 1900. Well, here we are in 2025, so we're 325 years into a 2,400-year cycle. Dwapara Yuga is 2,400 years. So we see new energy. It's like new wine. You ever hear that? Remember that expression from the Bible? New wine in the old wineskins. Or as my friend said, it's like dinosaurs on steroids. And we see that, of course, in the political scene and what's the wars and all the horrible things that are happening. But if we take a step back, what's happening is there's this new energy that's flooding the planet because our solar system, as Sri Yukteswar tells us, is getting closer to this galactical center. We're receiving more light, more energy, and we can use that energy to our benefit for self-expansion, Dr. Fred. And what's happening is a lot of the old institutions are breaking down, literally and figuratively. And in lower ages, well, we have a lot of autocrats, right? Unenlightened kings, so to speak. But Swami commented that one of the best forms of government is enlightened monarchy, meaning you have a king. Like think of Krishna. Krishna was a king. And of course, Krishna was a great self-realized master. He was a great avatar. And so if we take that, in other words, to our own selves, like we're a kingdom unto ourselves, Dr. Fred, right? We've got parts of ourselves that are, these bad politicians, but we have other parts of ourselves that are Krishna, right? And that's why it's making the choice to put ourselves, like part of right action is putting ourselves in proximity to the great ones, to open ourselves to their influence, right? To pray, like in the Mahabharata, the before the battle begins between the Pandava brothers and the Kauravas, Krishna is sleeping, and Arjuna, who's on the Pandava brothers, right? He is the devotee everyman. He represents us, the forces of light. And Duryodhana, who represents king material desire. They both come to Krishna for Krishna's blessing before the battle. And Krishna's omniscient and he knows, but he wakes up. Arjuna is humbly bowing at his feet, and Duryodhana is proudly standing by Krishna's head. And Krishna says, "Oh, I see you've come before the great battle. How can I help you? I'll tell you what I will do. I know that you're both here for help. I will give one of you all of my armies, all of my weapons, and everything. Uh, and the other, I will be your charioteer, but I won't lift a finger. I won't fight at all, but I will drive your chariot during the great battle. So which would you choose?" And Arjuna, since I saw you first, I give you first choice. And Arjuna responds without hesitation, "Oh, my Lord, I choose you, for where you are, there lies victory." Yata Dharma Tata Jaya, right? What we've been talking about. And Duryodhana, King Material Design, he's thrilled. He's like, because he gets all the armies and all the weapons and everything. And he's like, I'm what an idiot. He chose just Krishna to be his charioteer. But the true humble, the point is, the true humble devotee understands that where God is, no matter what is happening outside, if you have God, a victory is assured. And this is especially important in this day and age because it's lower Dwapara Yuga. It's a very chaotic, unstable time. And we can all, of course, relate to that. And I have found for myself, like, I need to pull out the yogi, right? Be a cause, not an effect, and just watch. Am I doom scrolling? Am I getting sucked into? I know I know about the problem. I want to focus on bringing more light and solution to the world, and that's where, and I feel better when I do that. You know what I mean? And versus when I'm getting sucked into, God, this is, man, things are bad. Oh, it just keeps, you just, yeah, you can just go down, right? That whole wormhole. Versus, you know what? The world may change. Swami said in a song, the world may change or disappear, but truth can never die. If we do, and we if we leave our body, we would have the resolve and the peace that we lived according to our conscience and according to our higher aspirations. So yeah,
That's
it's
what
a
you were saying the last time about the deeper you go into self-realization, the more ability you have to emanate spiritual vibrations into the universe and
yeah,
not be as upset with the phenomenal flux, the change.
yeah, yeah,
Swami Sri Yukteswar that he said
ex
that.
exactly, Dr. Fred. It's so powerful. Hey, do you know the Sri Yantra? Have you heard? Do you know so yantras are
A yantra,
geometrical. A yantra, you know what a yantra is?
that's a visual,
Yeah, exactly. They're geometrical patterns that
right?
represent states of consciousness, so to speak. Or
Yantra versus mantra, yeah.
yeah, exactly. So there's a deities will have certain mantras and yantras associated with them. Anyway, there is something called the Shri yantra. Okay, and let me see if I can share my screen with you to show you Shri yantra, because this truly is, a picture is worth 1,000 words here. If I can get it.
I was
Okay,
thinking about that just today. I was thinking about what you were saying about enlightenment. The, you
let's.
know, is that a enlightened decision or is that an unenlightened decision? Now,
Yeah.
if we just take the word bad and get rid of the word bad or crooked or evil and just
Mm-hmm.
enlightened versus unenlightened,
Mm-hmm.
I
That
feel better if I put it in that frame.
that
I mean, I
that's
feel physically better. You know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying, Dr. Fred. It's that is it's like, will this bring me, yeah, will this bring me, is this an enlightened decision? Where is it coming from and where is it leading me to as well? And Swami used to say, how do you feel? Like what is the feeling? Is it bringing a sense of happiness, of inner happiness, not excitement, of calmness, of calm expansion, of inner freedom? Uh, though that's a great way to think about it. And is something good or bad karma? It's not what happens to us, it's how we respond to it. Sister Gyanamata, that was Yogananda's most advanced woman disciple, used to say, it's not the things that happen to us that matter, right? It's what we become from them that
Mhm.
matters, right? And that's dependent upon our choice as well, right? What kind of choices are we making? And also, how are we receiving what life gives us? Are we framing it in such a way that, oh, why me, Lord, versus this is an incredible opportunity. Now here, I'm going to show you, I think this is coming up on my screen here. Sorry, this is really slow. Okay, here we go. Check this out. Share screen. This is the Sri Yantra. There are a bunch of images here, but you see this one. So there's a little dot there in the center, and then there's all these. You'll notice that this is a downward pointing triangle. The one in the very center holding this is called the bindu, or that little dot. That little dot, Dr. Fred, is like the Christ. Think of it as like the point between the eyebrows, right? So
Mm.
the still point of spirit within us. And then you have downward pointing triangles and upward pointing triangles. Not that we need to get into all of the ins and outs of the Sri Yantra, but the point is that it's from that still point that emanates duality. In other words, feminine and masculine, the downward pointing triangles and the upward pointing ones. And it's said that you can just by gazing at that point, this is very fascinating. The downward pointing triangle is a feminine triangle. And so this is like the Holy Trinity in a sense. We've heard that expression. I'm stopping the sharing. The expression of to Jesus through Mary. It's a Catholic dogma. But Yogananda said that, no, the Holy Trinity, it's a true Sanatan Dharma principle, meaning, Father, Mother, Holy Spirit. In India, it's known as Om, or the Mother, Tat, the Son, Sat, Om Tat Sat. Om is the Holy Spirit, Tat is the Christ consciousness, and Sat is the Father, the Spirit beyond. Or and you see in that Sri Yantra how again, to show you real quick, the Christ consciousness, the little dot, is held. This is called like the sanctum sanctorum. It's held by a feminine triangle. So it's like if you've seen those images of a baby Jesus being held by a Mary. What does this mean to us? It means that we will become enlightened, right? Is this an enlightened decision? You were just saying that, Dr. Fred. Will be led to enlightenment through the indrawing the Om vibration, right? It's through Om. There's the outer drawing aspect of Om, which is Maya, right? Which keeps things endlessly restless. But there's the indrawing grace of Divine Mother that's drawing. It's like Yogananda, his book. Remember the whisper from eternity? That's Om, right? It's silently calling us. That's why when we meditate, we want to develop the ability to listen. not just listen with our ears, but listen with our soul, right? To take in that divine vibration, and it's going to bring us to that stillness of spirit within us. So, is this an enlightened decision? That's why meditation is always an enlightened decision to help us, lead us in the direction of feeling God's presence within us. And then this whole lesson of being a leader is about, well, how do we maintain that sense of what is doing what is right, of holding on to Dharma amidst all of the vicissitudes of life, right? It's navigating, how do we be appropriate? How do we hold on to that sense of Dharma in a world that's more operating adharmically for the most part? Okay, wow, there's a lot in this chapter, in this lesson. Marie, was there anything that you wanted to share or add? Please feel free.
No, I just agree. There's a lot in this chapter. I'm
There's a
listening.
lot.
I really enjoy what you're saying. There's just so much. The one thing that I did note was that listening was such an important part of good leadership, and you just alluded to the fact that the listening part was important. So that's what I'm doing a lot of. But thank you. Yeah, there's just a lot in here. I was making notes about this particular chapter, and I just filled up my pages. It was so good. It's just a great chapter.
Thank you. I'm doing the same. I found myself underlying and making notes all throughout it. There was this one part on page 157, if you have the book. I'm on the right-hand side, that's second paragraph. Okay. I was more than willing to give in on minor issues, but I certainly wouldn't throw up my hands in surrender on major ones. A leader must be strong in himself. He cannot afford to be ruled by people's emotions. This is a little powerful little statement. But again, coming back to that, that yantra and meditating, the triangles on the outside of the yantra they talk about are different emotions, right? Greed, anger, this kind of thing. And as you're drawn more inward to stillness, right, that's where you feel God's presence. And so what does it mean, in other words, to be strong in oneself? We first have to know who we are, right? Who am I truly? Not, again, intellectually. And again, that's why I love that Yogananda gave that phrase, self-realization. Get to know yourself truly on a soul nature, right? And feel that inner strength, and then bring that to bear into your whatever role that life has cast you. This is Swami going on about working with the positive people. I've always found when dealing with negative energy that it has little cohesion. Positive energy, on the other hand, even if expressed by only a minority, creates a vortex of energy and power. And then he goes on, I'm jumping down. I therefore focused on the positive ones with whom I sought positive solutions. I urged those of them who were worried about the naysayers not to pay too much attention to their negativity. Life had already taught me, and has often corroborated the lesson, that man needs to be solution conscious, not problem conscious. This is, again, coming back to what we were talking about at the beginning, right? What is Sri Yukteswar? This is another Sri Yukteswar phrase, Dr. Fred. Learn to behave. That's it. You know, he didn't give you a lot, but he gave you a lot in the little that he said. Learn to behave. In other words, right, it's like it's learning to be in tune with the infinite spirit of God. But how do we, bridge that chasm, right? It's being solution oriented. This is why the yogis say, be even minded and cheerful. And someone from a worldly point of view will say, well, that's not real. That's not real life. Actually, it's founded on the ultimate reality of God's spirit, which is joy. And so if we're even minded and cheerful, we're living more closely into that spirit, like to that still point, like we were talking about, and we can see more solutions. It's just like looking up versus looking down. We have more positive energy. There are yoga postures, right, where we raise our hands, salutations to the sun, to the awakening light within, to the dawning of higher consciousness on all beings. When you bring these things into your physical body, the yoga postures are a great example of that. The physical movements are expression of states of consciousness. And so it's like in geometry where they used to tell you, if you remember, I remember high school geometry, they would say back into this proof, right? That you would have the answer, you'd have to create the question, or vice versa. You can back into these states of consciousness, right? By what did Yogananda give us? The energization exercise, yoga postures, affirmations, Kriya Yoga, right? Techniques to help you get in tune with the Spirit of God. And one of the attitudes, again, is being even-minded and cheerful. Okay, holy cow. We only have about 5 minutes. We're going to do the meditation here. So before that, Dr. Fred Marie, please. Any thoughts?
I'll just add this one little thing. You've said it a lot, but not quite the same words. When you were talking about Swami or Yogananda sitting in the back seat, or if you think about Christ washing the feet of his disciples, how I think that living the example rather than speaking the example sometimes is much more powerful when it comes to leadership. But I don't know. I just really enjoyed everything you said. But I've been thinking a lot about the example of servant leadership and also wanted just to speak that I think that leadership really begins on a more personal level. We must mature out of that. I think leadership, I've always believed it begins in our home and it begins with those that are closest to us, and our circumference seems to change, and the magnetism of people towards you comes out of a pure and sincere heart. I love that idea of constantly looking up, because then we are humbling ourselves, in a certain way, and then we're lifted up higher as we do release our power and control over things and receive the pure inclination of power in it. But anyway, just wanted to be a part.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for giving voice to that, Marie. Absolutely. In fact, Swami starts the lesson in that way, that everyone is a leader in that sense, just like you said, in the home. And it doesn't matter if we're leading an organization, whatever, wherever we are, we're a leader. And like you said, and he makes that point too, who we are is more important. And that's the real like that story of Yogananda, who he was drew people to him, right? It's not a position or
Even
a
in the
role.
kitchen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I like to clean the bathroom. Yeah, and I would have impacted your warehouse if I'd been there.
Well, you'll come. You'll get to see it next time you're
Well, yeah,
here. So let's close. I'm going to play Swami reading this meditation for us from this lesson on how to be a good leader. This is about a minute or so long. So I invite you to close your eyes, and again, just take a few conscious breaths as I get this ready to play for us here. And please just give me a thumbs up that you hear it once it gets going.
Meditation. Visualize a shining light radiating outward from the heart of infinity. Now, visualize that you are that light. Mentally send out light rays from your center to sustain the whole universe. See leadership as a training ground for infinite consciousness. See yourself as giving light, not as receiving it. See all things, all creation as needing what you have to give. Nourish all creatures in your light. Give to all of them your love. See to it that your feeling for others remains impersonal in the sense of asking nothing for yourself. Be concerned for the individual well-being of everyone. You are free in yourself. You are the Lord of everything that exists. For all eternity, you are in complete possession of your own being. Om. Peace. Amen. Thank you, friends. Thank you, Dr. Fred Marie. Great to see you both. And we'll be back in 2 more weeks with lesson 11.
thank you.
Okay.
Really
Have a
good.
beautiful
Use 2
evening.
hours for that one.
Bye bye.